Most agencies and consultants promote decks and deliverables. Alan Weiss wins with questions and consequences. He's the author of Million Dollar Consulting. He's in the Speakers Hall of Fame, and he's a contrarian who's coached leaders worldwide. Today we tackle the shift from pair of hands to peer advisor, why value, not visuals, sets your fees, how language controls business, and why strategy only fails in implementation. You'll learn the 1-year lens for strategy, how to be unghostable by creating need, not chasing want, and the simple options model that turns projects into retainers. This is about confidence, social proof, and charging properly for your thinking. If you're ready to stop pitching and to start advising, this one's for you. We are very grateful for you taking the time today. Your reputation precedes you. You've influenced so many people with all of your wealth of knowledge that you put out there into the market. So I know your time is valuable. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, my reputation precedes me, yet these people are still here, so I'm encouraged.
Beautiful, beautiful. Look, as we spoke earlier on briefly, we're coming from a world, as in the audience in the room, and me personally, myself, where we've been dealing with businesses, entrepreneurs, business leaders, even marketers, where a lot of the work that we've done traditionally has been in the more traditional creative space. So a lot of our work came through briefs where we had to follow instructions and kind of deliver on what was asked. And over time, when you start to ask the bigger questions as to why we're doing what we're doing, what's the reason behind this? What's the strategy behind this? It was often left with kind of a blank response. And that's the kind of transition that a lot of us have made and are making at the moment, kind of transitioning into that world of consultancy. How do we reposition ourselves as high trust advisors when clients still associate us with that kind of execution and the perception that we are the hands and not the trusted advisors?
Well, listen, the point here is to start at the right end. People ask me all the time, how do I establish what I am? How do I increase my fees? The real question is, how do I create more value? If
Mm-hmm.
you create more value, you'll create more income, you'll create a better life. There's an old story in the speaking profession. I'm in the Speakers Hall of Fame as part of what I do in life. And the old story goes like this. You come across a stonemason. Stonemason's laying bricks. And you ask the stonemason what's going on. The stonemason says, I'm laying bricks. You go to a second stonemason, and this stonemason says, I'm building a cathedral. So the moral of that story is that the second person sees a career, not a job. But I believe there's a third stonemason. And you ask the third stonemason what's going on, and that stonemason says, I'm bringing people closer to God. That's a calling.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us need the calling, because a calling is what provides maximum value to other people and makes you money. And making money is no sin. Making money enables you to have discretionary time. Money isn't wealth. Discretionary time is wealth. So the question I ask my coaching clients, and I have a global coaching program, is who do you want to be? And when I ask that question, 90% tell me what they want to be doing. And I have to stop and say, listen to my question. Who do you want to be? And in fact, I'm doing a program later this year in New York called Beyond Success. So the answer to your question, Stephen, I think is that you have to decide what contribution are you going to make that fulfills you, so that what you do isn't onerous, so that marketing isn't onerous, so that brand building isn't onerous. And it's a passion, and it's wonderful, and you can't wait to get at it. There are two kinds of people in the world, as you've always heard, right? There's the person that gets up in the morning and says, and it's morning here, uh, oh my God, I got bills to pay. People are ghosting me. I've got to figure out a new approach to this client, and I've got a bill to collect. And it's a long, slow crawl through enemy territory.
Mm-hmm.
The other kind of person gets up and says, what a great day. I wonder what kind of opportunity I can meet with today. That's our choice. So in this world, of disruption and volatility and tumult, we have more control than we think. So my advice is take control.
Nice. I like that. The second person is who I aspire to be. I don't always have a smile on my face in the morning, but I'm certainly working to get better at that. In terms of, I love what you said about the stonemason, laying bricks, building the cathedral, taking people closer to God. Is there a technique that you, because this is really within our sphere of what we do in branding, because what we try to help our clients do is to understand who they want to become and to really instill a sense of belief into what they're doing and why they're doing it. Is there a set of techniques that you have, or a go-to that you have, or exercises that you like to run in your consultancies with clients in order to bring them closer to that?
Well, let me give you two examples, then you can direct me where you want to go. A
Mm,
tactical and a strategic example. A tactical example is this. All of you probably have clients or no clients who are losing people. I mean, they're retiring or they're dying or they're poached by another firm or whatever it is. And the knee jerk, the default reaction of that client is, got to replace this person. Help me find a great person. They ask whomever, a search firm, a friend, whatever. But that's the wrong reaction. The wrong reaction, the right reaction is, do I need this job in the future? So instead of refilling a job that maybe was needed yesterday and might not even be needed today, but there was just somebody doing that stuff, what do I need for the future? That's a tactical beginning to start to look for the future that you're talking about, Stephen. The strategic approach is we have to eschew this approach. We have to give up looking at strategy. One of my recent books is Sentient Strategy. We have to stop looking at strategy the way Peter Drucker invented it 70 years ago, wherein you spend 2 months looking 10 years ahead, which today is ludicrous. You
hmm
know, there is no new normal. There will be no return to normal. I've trademarked a term called no normal. And what we're going to see, not just with AI, but with societal change and so forth, is continued tumult, continued disruption. And we have to get used to that. So, strategically, the best we can do today is look about a year out.
hmm
And if we help our clients with who they want to be and what their organization should look like, and consequently how their brand should evolve, a year will do it. And during that year, you keep looking at changes you want to make. We don't have the luxury anymore or the waste of time of engaging in weeks and weeks of strategic, sort of intellectual nonsense to look into a future we can't understand. Sometimes we can't understand tomorrow.
hmm
So those are some of the easy techniques I use. And it usually sets people back a step because they consider this, intense approach to strategy and replacing people you lose as some kind of holy writ, and it's not.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And really when we think of how we turn up to help our clients, the more we're able to kind of reverse engineer what they're trying to get to, and to help them understand what they're trying to get to, instead of you know uh, putting a target on the board and saying we need that, and reverse engineering through questions, the better we're all going to be by helping them understand what the challenge is in front of them. In terms of pitching to clients, okay, so obviously when we have the opportunity to speak to clients, part of the role in that particular moment is to understand what they need, but also to do it in a way where they see value in what we're doing, and we have the answers or the solutions to be able to help them with where they want to go. How do you reframe your pitch when clients are still focused on outputs, and that they really need that clarity before the outputs? What are some ways that you can help to get to that?
I'm laughing because you just covered about 7 points. I'm not sure where to start here. First of all, we don't pitch to clients. You know, you pitch a baseball.
hmm
I don't know, maybe cricket, you pitch that thing. I never did understand cricket. But there is no pitch. If you're walking into a client with a deck or something like that, or any visuals, get out.
hmm
Um, you converse with clients, and you converse with clients as a peer. Once you make a pitch, you're no longer a peer. You're a supplicant. And so you are a peer. You're an expert coming in. And I tell all of my clients, my coaching clients, you are an expert. And if you want to elevate, you're the expert, if you can justify that.
hmm
And so you have a conversation. Now, all clients know what they want, and they call them needs, but they're not needs. They're what they want. Few clients know what they really need. And so you have to separate want from need. So if a client wants this, by the way, folks, this is my screen sharing, so watch. If a
Mhm.
client wants this, but you create a need over here they didn't realize they had, that's what I call the value distance. And once you start to show a need they didn't know they had, fees are irrelevant. There is no competition.
Mm.
You are unique. Years ago, I got a call. This in the 80s. This is the last time I made a cold call purchase in the 80s.
Mhm.
This woman says to me, "Are you Alan Weiss?" Okay, fair enough. That's safe. I said, yes. She said, "Do you own a Mercedes 450 SLC?" I thought it was a recall. I said, "I do." She says, third question, final question. "How would you like to own one of the very first car phones in New England?" I thought about that for 3 seconds and I said, "How soon can you get here?" So the last cold call, I accepted. And it was hardwired into the dash, right? I didn't know I needed a car phone, and now, of course, we don't because we all have these.
Mhm.
But this was tremendous. My ego and I made business calls and everything. And not long after that, I'm talking to London on this hardwired phone. And I hang up and I said to my wife sitting next to me, "There's a lot of static on that call." My wife says, "Alan, for God's sakes, you're talking to London from your car. Shut up." So once you have a luxury and you use it twice, it is no longer a luxury. It's a requirement.
Mhm.
And what we have to do in this conversation we have with prospects is to be provocative, is to be counterintuitive, is to push right back at them because they hear spiels all day long. They have yes people all around them. The value that we bring is a counterintuitive approach. Now, one of my original brands before my name got popular was the Contrarian. And I would say, quality circles are ridiculous. You're wasting time. Circles go like this. And a lot of people hated that. But the people who loved it were the people I wanted as clients.
Mhm.
And so we don't pitch to clients. Excuse me, it's allergy season where I am. We don't pitch to clients. We come in as an expert. We provide them with ideas. Sorry, we
No
provide them
problem.
with ideas that they haven't thought of themselves. So when they say, we could probably do that internally, really, how's that working out for you?
Mhm.
So if you want the kind of remembrance that Stephen's talking about, if you want that kind of image where people won't ghost you, where they can't wait to meet you again, you have to say things they haven't heard before. And you'll be regarded as very different from the other people who happen to be maybe in the same space. So most people deal with ghosting with people who don't call them back as a contingency. How do I get them to call me back? That's not how you deal with it. You deal with it preventively by being absolutely irresistible, telling them things they never heard. And so they say, if I'm learning this much from this person for free, what would I get if I hired them?
Mm.
Stephen, how am I doing? Am I answering your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for everybody else, I forgot to mention it at the start. When you have a question, drop it in the chat. I'm going to open this up for Q&A afterwards. But Alan, you touched on something that really kind of hit home with me because um, I speak about the Epiphany Bridge. Okay, so it's exactly what you're saying here, and I want your take on the strategies that you use to really get to that, and that is asking, helping your clients to an epiphany of something that they didn't know that they needed, or they didn't know they had a gap in knowledge. And the better the questions you can ask that highlight that gap, the more chance they're going to have that epiphany. Is that along the lines of what you're talking about? And if so, what are the where do you go to really get into those gaps of what you know they don't know?
Well, I think it is, and I think that the question I ask people is, "What business are you in?" And then I will confront that if I think it's off base. IBM is stands for International Business Machine. They don't make business machines. They don't even make punch cards anymore. They don't even make software anymore, as far as I know. Their biggest profit contribution last year was from, guess what? Consulting. Uh, if you take a look at Dyson and you ask most people what Dyson's business is, they'll say vacuum cleaners. Dyson's in the air movement business. And so they make hair dryers and they make hand dryers, which actually work. Your hands don't come out dripping wet again. And if I had to anticipate Dyson strategically, I think that they're going to make vests that have some kind of chemical in them, and the air will circulate in there, and it will keep people warm with very lightweight garments. You won't have to wear these heavy coats or quilted coats, and this will be excellent for Arctic exploration and things like this. Now, I'm just guessing, but that isn't so far-fetched. And so you have to ask what the hell business you're in. We were working with IBM in Europe. And IBM says, the executives at the time said, we're in the profit business. Now, virtually nobody's in the profit business. That would go back to the old conglomerates, Gulf and Weston. The last big company, the best big enterprise in the profit business was GE. And GE now split into three separate companies and has 60 billion in debt. So much for that. So they said, we are in the profit business. We said, well, Hertz Rent-A-Car is very successful, very profitable at the moment. Why don't you buy them? They said, we'd never buy Hertz. I said, you're not in the profit business. So find out what business your clients are in, then help them with that epiphany you're talking about
Hmm.
to discover where they should be going within their real calling. Clients have callings too. If you look at Merck Pharmaceuticals, with which I worked for 12 years as a consultant, their mission was to bring the greatest in scientific research against the greatest areas of human health need. And when they discovered a drug, and it's very hard to get drugs approved, of course, in the US, they discovered a drug that didn't work, but accidentally it cured something else, African river
Hmm.
blindness. And when they found that out, and it was the biggest killer in Africa at the time, they gave it away for free to African countries. So you have a calling, you stay true to the calling, and then your epiphanies take place.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. And yeah, the Epiphany Bridge is something that I find very effective, but I love how you've kind of twisted it with the relevance of the business that they're in to be more specific about the type of question that you ask. So I really like that. I want to shift gears a little bit, Alan, towards pricing. Now, this is an area where it's sensitive for a lot of people, shifting gears from that kind of execution role more into the thinking role, and there is kind of a glass ceiling or a psychological ceiling of what we can actually charge when it comes to thinking. What's how do you kind of help overcome that psychological bridge when when people are still transitioning to really selling their thinking as opposed to the work that they were doing? What can you give our listeners to help them to understand the value of what they're actually giving away?
I've got three book deals right now, and one of them is called Seven Figure Consulting for John Wiley. And I just finished this morning the eighth chapter. I have two chapters to go. I'll turn it at the end of the month. And I am advising consultants of any stripe, of any kind, to go into advisory work as much as possible. And advisory work is about thinking. It's not about doing. You're not pulling levers or pushing buttons. You're not even trailing people around. You're serving as an advisor. Now, you don't have to do exclusively that kind of work. But I would be a contrarian here with Stephen's point, and that is that you can charge a fortune for thinking. It depends what the thinking produces,
Mm,
right? And so you don't want to come up with a 400,000th reason why teams don't work. Lindsay only covered that. But you do want to come up maybe with the first reason or the first practice of how you can effectively lead and motivate remote employees, which very few leaders I've seen today know how to do. Now, I know that might be a little building brands and so forth, but I'm just giving you an example. And so I think what you have to come up with are ideas. And here's the key to make a lot of money with ideas. You come up with social proof.
hmm
That's the key today because speed is as important as content. A lot of people say, take your time. It's not that fast. No, no, no. Here's social proof to prove speed, at least in the US, and my experience in Europe too, is that if you want to get a car to take you somewhere, you say, let's Uber this.
mm,
You don't say, let's Lyft this. You say, let's Uber this. If you want to send someone the next day, you say, let's FedEx it. You don't say, let's DHL this or, yeah, let's UPS this. So the first one in
mm,
becomes a verb if they're any good, and you can correct along the way. So speed is very important. And I would suggest to you that your ability to use language and to get people convinced early, fast, of your great, great value is the way you get paid a lot. As I said before, if I'm getting this much for free, what do I get if I hire this person?
mm,
So here's the immutable sequence. Language controls discussion. Discussion controls relationships, and relationships control business. If you master the language, meaning social proof, meaning metaphors, meaning analogies that people can relate to, you're going to get what you need. Now, here's social proof about branding. So I'll go back to your sweet spot here. Not too long ago in New York, advertising firms took some surveys of their clients. And the survey was, how do the clients feel about the firms? Do they feel less than the firm thinks they feel about them, or the same, or better? And the firms, the advertising firms, hope that they feel about the same in terms of value. Well, the results were overwhelming. Their clients felt much better about them than the firms did, which means that the firms, the advertising firms, were undercharging and over delivering, and their brand wasn't sufficient. People, as you know better than I probably, create emotional attachments to brands. You don't need a Brioni to be well attired. You don't need a Bentley for transportation, right? And my kids keep telling me, "Hey, Dad, you don't need that watch. You know, you have an iPhone." And I keep telling them, "I don't wear a watch to tell the time." So it's a question of emotional connection. And when people feel an emotional connection, they buy. And emotional connections can last a long time if you don't lose them. So you can get paid a fortune for ideas today if you prove their utility. And that's what social proof does. Whether you're writing, you're speaking, or you're conversing with that peer in the office, that will usually seal the deal.
Nice, nice. And I actually want to dig into that topic of utility with you a little bit. Maybe we'll kind of bring it back a couple of steps until we get to that utility. Getting to that utility is probably what I want to dig into to you with you first. Um, in terms of the structures or the frameworks within your consulting services that you have traditionally offered, how does that what are your go-tos when you sit down with a new client? Do you have a very uh, a very robust structure, or depending on the client, it can take you in different places? Do you run workshops and sit down with groups of people? We all have our different ways of working with clients, but what are your principles when getting to that key strategy and that utility?
I have no structure. I believe in something called the 1% solution. And the 1% solution says if you improve by 1% a day in 70 days, you're twice as good. 1% a day in 70 days, you're twice as good. Ostensibly, that's why you're here. See if you can learn something.
Mm.
And I'll learn more than all of you because I always make a point to do that. So here's maybe the 1% for some of you, if you feel this applies. And that is, I never go in with a regimen. I don't even coach with a regimen. I have no coaching discipline per se. Everything's based on the individual in front of me because everybody's different. Consequently, I come in as an expert and I decide once I hear from the other party, be it a company or a person, what is the best way to express my expertise to help this person? Is it coaching? Is it training? Is it a workshop for this person's people? Is it some kind of focus group approach that makes sense to get people together? And so on and so forth. I have something called the accelerant curve, which appears in almost all of my books. And it talks about the fact from free things like, newsletters or free Zoom workshops, all the way to a vault where you're doing things that nobody else in the world might be doing. There's a variety of ways to interact with your clients. And if you have too strong a regimen when you approach, sort of your feasible set is like this, people are going to fall outside of that set. If your feasible set is like this, see, it goes off the screen, you're going to have a lot more opportunity to work with people. And individuals need branding, corporations need branding, nonprofits today desperately need branding. Everybody needs branding. If, the way I define a brand, and probably, you can't throw things at me right now because we're remote, but you might switch off. The way I define a brand is it's how people think about you when you're not around. Simple as that. And if
Hmm.
they think about you when you're not around, because this is a timing business, that's a strong brand. Stephen, I'm going to stop there so I don't use up the rest of our time. But am I answering your question?
Yeah, look, like in terms of how you see a brand, we're 100% aligned with that. It is your reputation, and what we're trying to do as brand builders is we're trying to first of all get to that center point of what's important to the client, because at the end of the day, we can come into a room and we can say, well, this is what your market looks like. This is who your target audience is. This is what your competitors are doing. And this is your positioning strategy. However, unless you actually work and collaborate with the client, you're not going to get that sense of ownership. You're not going to get that sense of buy in because you're handing them a solution instead of involving them in the process. How much do you involve them in that process versus understanding their challenge and telling them this is what you need to do?
Well, in the first place, separate out business acquisition from delivery. Business acquisition is diagnostic, and you work with the buyer and only with a buyer, never with a non-buyer. Never work with anybody who can say no but can't say yes. That's not our topic today, but I wanted to get that in. You work with the buyer and you diagnose what's going on. So you might, I'm going to just mute myself here for a minute. You might, um, in this diagnostic with the buyer, talk about the business. You'll talk about social proof. You'll talk about where you've come from and what you think. And you'll give the buyer so much enrichment and have that buyer included in this decision that the buyer wants to go forward. I call this conceptual agreement. When you implement, you become prescriptive. You are the expert. If they could have gotten to where they want to go without you, they would have done it. So
Hmm.
I believe you're diagnostic in the business acquisition and you're prescriptive in the delivery. I don't think you need to be a content expert to be prescriptive. I am not data oriented. I am oriented toward the dynamics of attracting people and how that works. And
Hmm.
of course, in this day and age, the elephant in the room is AI. And I think a lot of people, both consultants and our clients, have a very distorted view of what AI is and what it can do. That's my opinion.
Hmm.
So, I would say, Stephen, that once you gain admittance in a diagnostic manner, and the client feels involved, the buyer feels involved with that. After that, you're the expert and you
Hmm.
become prescriptive and you say, it's not that you ignore people's input, but you do say, here's the regimen I've decided is right for your company under these conditions at this time.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. And that leads us into the utility that you were speaking about before. So in terms of how you deliver what your solutions are and how then those solutions are implemented, because you know, strategy is the strategy, consulting is the consulting, but then there's the hands and the execution on the other end. So for example, in our world, when we build a brand strategy, we build first and foremost the approach of that brand. That approach is, the position in the market, what we want the market to feel and think about our brand. Getting clear on that is, in fact, the strategy, although there is no implementation as such from that point. Brand strategy, the mode for me, this I'm kind of going into my philosophy here, is where we mobilize that approach into the market. So when you have a strategy ready to go, and we're talking about utility here, what are the key things that you want to see from a strategy that makes it valuable in terms of utility and going out and implementing that in the market?
Well, the reason I wrote Sentient Strategy is that the factor that's not sufficiently supported is accountability. No strategy fails in implementation. Excuse me. No strategy fails in formulation.
Hmm.
Strategies fail in implementation.
Hmm.
So in formulation, you have this wonderful plan, and when it used to be hard copy, it was color coded and had little tabs on it and so forth. Now it sits on a desktop. But my contention is it can gather dust on a desktop just like it can on a shelf. So formulation is beautiful, it's lovely, it's pristine, but the fact is that it fails in implementation. So now I ask myself as a consultant, what's the cause? Why does it fail in implementation? It fails because accountability is missing.
Hmm.
And so what you have to do with the strategy to make it work is you have to say to your buyer, because this has to trickle down, when you meet with one of your subordinates, you don't just talk about quarterly results. You don't just talk about attrition. You say, how is your progress toward our strategic goals with the brand? And you hold them accountable, and there are consequences for doing things and not doing things. That's what accountability is.
Hmm.
One of the options I suggest with strategy, and I would suggest to you as brand strategy builders, is an option where you come back once every 90 days or whatever the frequency is, and you check on what I call the accountability quotient. And
Hmm.
so you perform an outside, very high value a service to your buyer
Hmm.
by saying to your buyer objectively and impartially, hey, listen, you're making great progress, or you're making lousy progress, or this department's not following its accountability goals. So that has to trickle right down. There's There's seldom let's me put it this way. It's not common for any superior to talk to a subordinate and say, look, you had a great quarter, but your progress toward your strategic brand goals is not good, so I can't give you a high rating. That doesn't happen. And so that's what you have to change. There have to be consequences.
Hmm.
And you can't allow brand growth and brand strategy and so forth to become existential.
Hmm.
It has to be a practical thing on your dashboard at all times, so you know how fast you're going and what direction you're going in and so forth. And if you create the accountability, you'll create successful implementation. And there's going to be obstacles. And people have to understand that my accountability is to blow through those obstacles or circumvent them and not simply throw your hands up and say, well, can't get by there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I like that, and I think the key there is the accountability and the ownership, and I think to a strategy is only as good as how it's implemented. And I think the bridge there is the implementation steps and the clarity of the implementation steps and how that is implemented in the market. In terms of the high level,
Stephen, excuse me. Before your
yes.
next question, I just want to, before I forget, apropos social proof. I just read this morning that Netflix is having a record quarter.
Hmm.
uh, and because and they have arms full of awards now for art, a Tonys or Emmys, whatever it is. It wasn't that long ago that Netflix changed its pricing on rentals and lost 600,000 subscribers. 600,000 customers left. Now you would think there's a company that really blew it and they're going out of business. That's going to become Sears Roebuck and they're out. And today they're as powerful as could be, both financially and artistically. That's because they changed their strategy, understood what was going on. And I just want to make the point that you don't have to be GE and disappear down the sewers. You can smartly change your branding so that you're seen as something completely other. In other words, there's social proof for it. I'm sorry, Stephen. Thank you.
Mhm. No, no, no. I like that, and I like the Netflix story and how it intertwines with the blockbuster story as well. And yeah, they've really kind of there's so many lessons for us to learn from that brand, particularly in terms of the. I want to go back to what you said before because I think that's super interesting to me and to everybody here about the high level overview that you obviously offer as an extension of your core offer. If you were to do that as a brand builder, what kind of principles could you give us in terms of how to structure that offer, how to make sure that it's as valuable as possible for the client?
Well, I think all proposals should have three options in them. There should be a basic option that meets the objectives of the client. So ethically, I can take option one. My objectives will be met. The impact of those objectives will be realized, which is the value, which provides an ROI on your fee. And there should be a 10-to-1 relationship. You save $1 million, build $1 million, you get 100,000.
Hmm.
Basically, that's it. Option two should include option one, but go beyond that. So if brand building included, let's just say, an assessment of your products and services and competition, just arbitrarily,
Hmm.
option two might embrace option one, but also include talking to past clients and see what they would have to do to come back, talking to presumed future clients who you don't have now, and seeing what it would take to lure them in and so forth. And then option three would be inclusive of options one and two, but it would also include, say, these repeat visits I talked about once a quarter or once or twice a month or whatever you happen to believe in, so that you're keeping them honest. And
Hmm.
I think if you do that, you do a couple of things. One is that you maximize your fees because you're maximizing your value. The second thing is, though, you might be building a client for a long, long time because if you agree with me at all that strategy needs to be revisited frequently, why would they do it with anyone but you?
Hmm.
And don't forget, when you make a sale, there are three aspects to a sale. The first is the check that you get immediately. The second is expansion business within that client. I said I work with Merck for 12 years. I work with Hewlett Packard for 10 and so forth. And the third is referral business.
Hmm.
And the client will refer you to others, non-competitors, and sometimes even competitors, if they think you're doing that good a job. If you look at the literature from my colleagues, people like Dan Pink and Jonah Berger and so forth, they found that over the last 10 years, uh, 80% plus of executive decisions on purchases are made from peer level referral, not social media, not advertising, peer level referral. That's what we should go after.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. What you were saying before about the the offer of the extension of that business, that kind of really ties into the idea of becoming more of a relationship with your client, and it's something that we as executioners struggle with a little bit in the transition because we're so used to project-based work. You do a project, you shake the client's hand, see you later, off they walk into the horizon. But more and more, you know, good consultants, or certainly ones that want to extend their customer lifetime value, they're the ones who are building relationships with their customers and continuing to offer value through a relationship. How do you position that relationship from the start, so you're not seeing as somebody coming in to just do a project and then see you later, but to position from the very beginning, I'm here as a partner, as somebody to help you over time, and kind of have a relationship with you.
Well, the first thing you do is you make that sale and that relationship with the buyer, with what I call the economic buyer. You
Hmm.
never attempt to do that at a lower level because you'll be associated with that level, even if you're successful, and you usually won't be. Don't forget there's a difference between budget and money. Budgets are predetermined amounts of money for cleaning the parking lot or a new sales training program, whatever it is. But real buyers can move money among budgets. So
Hmm.
very few people budget for somebody they've never heard of who's going to walk down the street and say, I'm going to build your brand, even if you're introduced formally. But they can move money. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you become a partner of that buyer, and the two of you are in this together, and you're seen as that within the organization. I'll remind you that probably something you don't need reminding of, but I'll say it to make sure I do, and that is that we all have accountability too as consultants, but only the buyer has authority. And
Hmm.
consequently, I can't make someone change. I can't make someone meet their commitments because I don't have consequences for them, but the buyer does. Hence, you need that partnership so that the accountability I have is to tell the buyer your authority is needed over here.
Hmm.
And then finally, if you don't blow your own horn, there is no music. And so you have to walk the talk and talk the walk. I have a sort of a LinkedIn TV program with one of my clients in Australia. We do once every 2 weeks, and it's called Talking the Walk. And the point here is that you have to tell your buyer and anybody else, any stakeholder who's important, what's being accomplished. You don't have to take all the credit. The credit will eventually accrue to you, but you have to say, here's the progress we're making. Otherwise, people just hear problems. They don't hear victories. So I think those three things are important, Stephen. And I think that that will ingratiate you. It will create protection from the company's immune system, which tends to reject outsiders. And it can create a really long-term client relationship.
Yeah, there's some great lessons in there, and I've already been thinking of the transcription and how we can condense that down into a little post for people to kind of chew on. I want to shift gears a little bit because you did, and I think you've got quite a unique take on AI from where we are at the moment, but certainly as consultants, and as executioners moving towards consultancy, we very much have our eyes on the future, and where the market's going to be in a few years. Before I dig into that a little bit, why don't you give me your take first and foremost? Because I know we spoke briefly about it. You mentioned a little bit about it as well. I just want to understand your perspective on what you think people think AI is, and what you think AI is, certainly in the short term, anyway.
Oh, let's see, about 50 years ago, a guy named John Nesbitt published a book called Megatrends.
Hmm.
And Megatrends was somewhat exceptional because Nesbitt was prescient. He had accurate predictions, and one of his great predictions was high tech, high touch, 1982. High tech, high touch. And today, in 2025, we need high tech, high touch more than ever. Consequently, AI will create great, great opportunity for high touch.
Hmm.
There are things AI can do that are great. I mean, AI will eliminate accountants, it'll eliminate air traffic controllers eventually.
Hmm.
It'll eliminate actuaries and insurance companies. It will eliminate white collar workers in FedEx, but it won't eliminate FedEx drivers.
Hmm.
It won't eliminate people who sit down and explain your estate plan to you or your insurance needs. And so we won't save every job. There's no reason to. We're already seeing, automated cashiers in stores. People want to go to live cashiers to save their jobs. That won't save their jobs.
Hmm.
But the thing about AI is it's a tool.
Mm-mm.
It is not a perfect tool. It's an imperfect tool, but a valuable tool. Probably like most of you, I can put my finger on here, on my phone, on my keypad, and wonderful things happen. I mean, that's AI. And like I said, a luxury is a luxury only until you use it twice. So we come to accept it like that. So I put AI on my website. I found a firm, I researched it, and you can go to my website. You can subscribe to this for lifetime. And the thing answers you in my words using my body of work and shows you the references, which you can download. It'll direct you to a video. It will even take you to one of my books or more that's relevant, and not just say buy value-based fees. It will say page 36, second paragraph. So I believe in that because the same reason I put all my IP in all my books, 60 something books in 15 languages, is this. I'll give you the IP. You're still going to need me
Mm.
because nobody can do it as well. And if I can attract you with the beauty of my IP, with the relevance of it to you, you're going to need me to implement. Now, will some people think they can do it themselves? Sure. But, you want to learn to ski? Nobody ever did that by reading a book. Not if you don't want to crash into a tree at 40 miles an hour. Nobody learned to ride a bike by reading a book. And so my contrarian kind of feeling is my IP's out there. People saying, hey, somebody's stealing your IP. It's on this site. I don't care. It's marketing. So I think AI is a wonderful, wonderful tool. I think we have to calm our clients the hell down. I think they're much too afraid of it because they don't understand it
Hmm.
and they don't realize that they need to mold this for the best utility for them.
Hmm.
Stephen, how am I doing? Is this what you're asking me? You want me to
Yeah,
go
it
on
is.
or?
It absolutely is. I'd like to dig into because not all of us are Alan Weiss. Okay, we, I mean, you've built your reputation. You're working with these big companies for working with smaller to medium sized businesses. How do we borrow, not borrow, borrow's the wrong word. How do we take your confidence of, because I certainly talk about giving away your IP, give away your ideas, and you show people that you have what they need and they'll gravitate towards you. But for those who don't have your level of profile or your level of confidence, what can you give them to hang their hat on, that giving away their knowledge and attracting people to have the confidence to say you still need me to do this? What would you say is the key principle there, the key to kind of showing up with that confidence?
All right, Stephen, just remind me of Calgon when I'm done. I want to go back to Calgon, and I don't want to
Calgon,
forget it.
okay.
Calgon. I want to tell you a story I never tell anybody. You
Okay.
just prompted. It's appropriate for you. Look, answer your current question. Um, uh, Everybody wrote a first book. People say, like, yeah, it's a first book. How can I? Every one of us who's written multiple books wrote a first book. Every one of us who speaks well had a first speech. Every one of us who made a sale had a first sale.
Hmm.
Okay. Works with everybody. The only time it doesn't work is if you give up. $1 Million Consulting, which was my fourth book and is the franchise, right?
Hmm.
It's on the shelves for 32 years and sixth edition, was rejected 15 times.
Hmm.
It was originally called Confessions of a Consultant. And to this day, right, 30 some odd years later, I still get my royalty statement from McGraw Hill and it says Confessions of a Consultant. That's how bureaucracies work. So, what you have to do is you have to be singular and you have to show to a client that you think differently. And what you believe, right, is expressed through your behaviors. So I suggest if you're not sufficiently distinguishing yourself, change your beliefs. And the belief most people have to change, this is the next chapter in the book I'm writing right now, the ninth chapter, is self-esteem. These
Mm.
people need me. Not how can I get in? These people need me.
Mm.
I have to make them understand how much they need me. I have to make them understand that they're not going to hear from others what they're hearing from me. And I'm going to tell them things that they don't like hearing. You have to be bold.
Mm.
I call it shameless promotion. You have to be bold. And so if you think about upside downside, all right, now this is actually intellectual property. I tell people this in my coaching programs all the time. Look at upside downside. Most people are afraid of moving forward because of the downside, and there is no downside. There's only an upside. You don't get a sale, that's not a downside, it's a learning experience.
Hmm.
Do you know why people procrastinate? They procrastinate out of fear because their fear of completing something and being critiqued for it is greater than their fear of being called a sloth or a
Hmm.
sluggard or somebody who doesn't get things done. So you have to be willing to set yourself apart and to do things for the first time and to learn from failure and regard it as a learning experience, but present prospects, the right prospect, always the buyer, things that he or she has not heard before. Now, I'm going to just tell you about
Yeah,
Calgon
the
here real
story.
quick. I've, I don't tell the story I'm telling you. I worked for 5 years with Calgon. They were owned by Merck. They were a complete separate company, but they were owned by Merck. And so they sent me over there. Calgon was in big trouble. And Calgon was number three in the water treatment business.
Hmm.
And they had had 4 or 5 consultants in there. And so Merck sent me over out of desperation. And they had 4 or 5 consultants before me. I said, what the hell are we going to do? And so I said, well, okay, you're number three. Where's number two? And they said, well, number two is way out there on the horizon. We can barely see number two. I said, where's number one? They said, we can't see one over the horizon. I said, okay, first of all, dispose of the idea you're ever going to be number one. They said, what? I said, you're not going to catch them. What do we do? You change who you are. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, who are you? We're a water treatment company. I said, no, no. And this was the height of the environmental movement. I said, you're a liquid effluent management company. Because they would do things like take the paint residue from painting booths and car shops and clean it up. And all this ugly stuff they would clean up. And the environmental movement was very big on this stuff. You're a liquid effluent management company. Just change the wording, change this. And you already have what they call field engineers with their salespeople, which is just train them to say this and stuff. But otherwise, you do the exact same thing you're doing. And they became number one in that market. And a few years later, they were sold to English China Clays for a fortune.
Wow.
That's what advice does.
Mm.
I didn't go to any of their customers. Okay. I just listened to what their problem was and realized that their problem was insoluble the way they had phrased it.
Hmm.
We want to be number one in this water business.
Mm.
And so what you had to do was change the thinking. So in response to Stephen's question, and what I'm telling you, maybe the 1% for some of you is you can make a fortune giving advice, right? I
Mm.
made millions at Merck. You just have to be fearless and be willing to accept the fact that you're an expert and not be tainted by the mythology and the beliefs that exist. You change beliefs, you'll change behavior.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. I did have. I've got a ton more questions that I would have wanted to, but I don't want to leave you hanging without a hot drink before your next meeting. So I'm gonna hand it over to a few of our guests, guys. These are gonna have to be quick fire questions. Um, so but before I hand it over to because something popped up a little earlier when you were talking about that self-esteem. Did you ever struggle with, even in your early career, did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome in any way, shape, or form? Walking into a room, being in around CEOs and being afraid that they see through you. Have you ever had that situation? I mean, that obviously a long, long time ago, if it ever was. But did you ever struggle with that?
I was a scared little kid growing up. I grew up in the inner city and we were poor.
Mm,
So I was a scared little kid. Everybody was Italian Catholic or Irish Catholic, and I was really nothing.
mm,
And I remember one of my very first training assignments for a company I worked for in Princeton in the 70s was in New York. And I went over there and I had my suit on, and it started in the afternoon, and then it was the next morning. And the first thing I did was I knocked over all 3 easels, and the easel markers went all over the place, and we had to take time to reassemble these and so forth. The afternoon was a horror show. So the next morning, I came back, and at lunch, I said to the coordinator, what did they think? And he said, well, they were mostly surprised you came back.
mm,
And so what I learned was my world didn't end.
mm,
They were unhappy, and justifiably so, but they were unhappy because I was nervous.
mm,
And I asked myself, what are you nervous about? This isn't going to end your career. And get your ego the hell out of here. And after that, I learned the fact that I am who I am. I got to be comfortable in my own skin. And to this day, I have never, and I advocate other people never, listen to unsolicited feedback. Solicited feedback's fine, like I got that day.
mm,
But unsolicited feedback's always for the sender. So
mm.
have some people you trust. If you want feedback, ask them, but don't become a feedback ping pong ball.
I'm going to wrap that up into a quote. Unsolicited feedback is for the sender. I love that one. Guys, we're going to be doing a quick fire on this one. We've only got a few minutes. We're going to have to let Alan go. Gail had a quick question. I'm just going to wrap this one up for you, Gail, because there's a couple of comments here. And I think the best way to wrap this up is the difference between implementation and execution from your perspective. Is there any difference? Is that how you see it? Implementation, execution, is are they the same thing in your eyes?
Absolutely identical.
Yeah. Phyllis, we have a question. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
My thing was because you use your name as part of your brand, how do you separate your personal from your professional? How do you make sure that people don't cross certain boundaries?
Well, I don't have a personal life and a professional life. I have a life. And
Okay.
No, no, no.
consequently,
I think Alan, the question was about your personal
oh,
brand and your business brand. How do you separate the two?
oh, I'm sorry. I don't have a business brand, Phyllis. Summit Consulting Group is my legal entity. And so that's the thing that has a bank account and things like that, and that would be sued if someone would sue me. But that's simply a legal entity. I don't try to brand it. My name is my brand. And so I'll put down, instead of, let's say, I have these things called growth cycles. It would be Alan Weiss's growth cycle, and that's what I trademark. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, a little bit because it's like if someone wanted you, me personally, I had to learn boundaries from my previous business. I owned a restaurant, and it was that when people called my name, they thought they knew me personally when they only knew me professionally, and
Hmm.
that's why I have a named moniker for my personal brand, and that's why I'm like every time somebody hollers out, "Ooh, Alan." Which Alan are they getting? It's like, and I totally agree. All of it's your life, but then how do you determine which Alan they get?
I don't. What is it? What's the phrase? What you see is what you get. And so if you go to my
Mhm.
website, alanweiss.com, you'll see my cars, you'll see my family, you'll see personal stuff, and then you'll also see business opportunities. I don't worry about that, and I think it's important to disclose, really, Phyllis. I think it's important to let people know who you really are.
I have no problem with that. Thank you.
You're
Daisy,
welcome.
Daisy, I think your question was answered in the topic of mindset a little bit earlier on about self-esteem. I hope that worked for you. Matt, do you want to jump in quickly? This would be the last question, and then Alan is going to direct us to where we can get all his goodies.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Hi, Alan. I've read many of your books, and the question I've always wanted to ask you is: are there particular phrases you use to move a client at the end of a project onto a long-term advisory retainer?
Yes, but I use those questions before a project ends. The best way to get long-term expansion business or to get referral business is during the project. I never wait till the end. I try to talk to a buyer weekly when I start, and then maybe twice a month as the project goes on, because I want to provide that good news and the occasional problem. But I never wait till the end for anything. And just parenthetically, those of you who have various kinds of billing terms never ever get paid at conclusion, ever, because it'll never conclude.
I love that. Alan, we have squeezed as much of orange out of the juice as we possibly could in this hour. Thank you so much. Where can people get all your goodies? Because I know that you've got. I mean, we could be years reading all of the stuff that you've put out there. But where is the best place for people to go to get what they need?
Okay, I hope the squeeze was worth the juice, so to
It was
speak, there,
indeed.
Steve. Um, AlanWeiss.com, AlanWeiss.com, and you will find monthly videos and weekly podcasts. And on all social media, I have a minute with Alan, which is usually like 3 minutes, but every weekday there's a minute with Alan. All that's free. My podcasts are free. My blog is free. My blog's on the website. Everything's there. And one more thing I'll tell you is this AI I talked about, which has access to all my books and everything. If you're interested, and you mentioned Stephen's name, and you go there, you can see where you could sign up. You see an example, you could sign up. I'll provide 20% off for his listeners, whether you're here live or you're getting this on recording. So you can really experience what this is about and maybe continue with some of this learning and hear from me in a different way.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much. That's very generous of you guys. I'll leave the links in the description of the replay and add in the podcast as well. Alan, thank you so much for taking the time. It has been an absolute pleasure. I know you're a very, very busy man, so it really has been an honor. So thank you so much for taking the time and for all the goodness that you've delivered to us today.
Well, it's very kind of you. I take the time because obviously I love doing it. It's my calling. And I wish you all the best. Thank you for investing in your own development and being here with me and helping me to learn. So all the best and take care. Don't worry, the future's bright.
Thank you so much, Alan. I want to take a second to show some appreciation. I appreciate every single one of our listeners, but I have a soft spot for listeners who share the love. A shout out to Amelia from the UK. Stephen is a wealth of knowledge. This podcast has helped me learn so much about the world of branding. I found Stephen through his YouTube channel, and then as a busy mum, his podcast was great for on the go. Amelia from the UK, thank you so much for your review. I thoroughly appreciate it. If you want to share the love and possibly get a shout out on the podcast, please take a couple of minutes to leave a review on your favorite platform. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more brand strategy techniques to level up your skills, make sure you check out brandmasteracademy.com. There's plenty of free resources and premium content for you to download and get you going. If you'd like to join our Facebook group full of like-minded brand strategists, all learning from each other, then find us by searching for the Brand Strategy Community, where you can find exclusive content for members as well. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to give us an honest review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listened, and make sure you tune in for the next episode of the Brandmaster Podcast.